All right, I think we're live. Just seeing the comments right now. Still Punk AF says there's a lot the West can learn from Northern Ireland. Won't disagree. So, all right, well, it's Monday. Back to the salt mines, everybody. As usual, a lot of stuff happened this weekend. The corporate media fixed their narrative about Biden. The French snap election saw a far-right victory, preliminary victory, which we'll touch on briefly. Y'all noticing kind of a global trend with this far right stuff, just more we get to look forward to. Protests in Israel as the ultra Orthodox communities rebel against their being drafted into military service. Hamas shoots more rockets as fighting continues in the north of Gaza, where Hamas is not supposed to be, according to the Israeli government. And U.S. and Israeli officials and assorted think tanks put forward unworkable proposals to figure out a day after plan and the Strip. So this is State of Play at Mint Press News, an editorial geopolitical bi-weekly news show streamed live twice a week. Okay, I already said bi-weekly, but bi-weekly can mean every other week or twice a week because the English language is the way the English language is. So it's twice a week, and it's hosted by me, Greg Stoker. Still new to this, so I'll endeavor not to screw things up. Will I or won't I? Well, keep watching to find out. So as everyone trickles in, just let me say that Mint Press is an independent newsroom and doesn't have any corporate sponsors. Mint Press has been banned from PayPal. Fundraisers have been taken down by GoFundMe and demonetized on YouTube. If you'd like to support this brand of independent journalism, consider dropping your Economist subscription and slanging $5 a month this way. Also, WAPO, Washington Post, it's just a cutout for the CIA anyways, so they don't need your money. They get plenty in kickbacks. It does go a long way to support independent watchdog journalism. If not, I get it. We're all, after all, getting nickeled and dimed to death in this contemporary modern world. Because now I have to go tip people at my local convenience store because they don't earn a living wage now. It's not just wait staff. It's people that work, So that's great. So we're just glad you're here. Again, Patreon. So the main subject of tonight is these new proposals for a day after plan in Gaza, i.e. who will run Gaza when the nebulous conditions for victory are achieved. Little bit of a teaser. They ain't new. You're being gaslit. But anyways, first off is this continued post-presidential debate drama. And in case you unplugged for the weekend, here's what you missed. Biden is not backing down after what was arguably the worst presidential debate performance ever. So after the abysmal performance at his debate, he's going for it, and the DNC is totally backing him. And remember, kids, Democrats don't exist to defeat Republicans. They exist to deny actually progressive candidates from power or political access for meaningful change. So here's a primer vid for what's going on right now.
President Biden digging in and driving on after huddling with family members who encouraged him to stay in the race, according to multiple sources familiar with the conversations during a pre-planned weekend at Camp David. NBC News has learned his campaign manager sought to reassure key donors Sunday, emphasizing the president will not step aside and explaining the logistical difficulties in replacing him on the ticket, per two participants on the call. All after a damaging debate performance Thursday night deeply rattled members of his own party, some Democrats acknowledging the ongoing discussion.
There are very honest and serious and rigorous conversations taking place at every level of our party. We're having a serious conversation about what to do.
The editorial boards of both the New York Times and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution are urging the president to step aside, even as his allies publicly rally around him, like former Presidents Obama and Clinton.
Do you think President Biden should drop out of this race, Senator?
Oh, absolutely not.
I think it was a weak debate performance by President Biden, but I think side by side, Donald Trump had a horrifying debate performance where, yes, he spoke plainly, But what he said was lie after lie after lie.
His campaign points to more than $30 million raised since Thursday as a sign of grassroots support. But a new poll conducted in the days after the debate shows 72% of voters think President Biden does not have the cognitive health to serve as president, up 7% since early June. The poll, which has a margin of error of 4.2 points, shows voters essentially split on whether former President Trump had the cognitive health to serve. Now, President Biden's supporters have made the case former President Trump's dangerous for the country, and the Philadelphia Inquirer's new op-ed argues it's Mr. Trump who should withdraw because of his repeated lies. As for the president's team, we're told by two sources his campaign chair is expected to hold a call with a larger group of donors later on tonight. Chanel?
Okay, so right now, what you're seeing in liberal circles, especially the liberal media, is that they are now trying to correct the narrative. What you saw Thursday night after the debate was the honest reaction of a bunch of CNN pundits who were shocked by how bad Biden's performance was. It really demonstrates kind of like why he's only allowed to do scripted press conferences in the middle of the day, where if there's a Q&A, questions are pre-selected, and why he doesn't sit for major interviews. This is why. We see why this dude, the president, has been sheltered in the bowels of the White House for so long. Now, the actual Democratic donors know what's going on. Now they do. So, according to the AP, quote, DNC Chairman Jamie Harrison and Biden campaign manager Julie Chavez Rodriguez held a Saturday afternoon call with dozens of committee members across the country, a group of some of the largest, most influential members of the party. They largely ignored Biden's weak showing Thursday night or the avalanche of criticism that followed. Multiple committee members on the call, most granted anonymity to talk about the private discussion, described feeling like they were being gaslighted, that they were being asked to ignore the dire nature of the party's predicament. The call, they said, may have worsened a widespread sense of panic among elected officials, donors, and other stakeholders. So I think it's important to remember that people first speaking about Biden's cognitive decline were doing so in like 2018, 2019, and they were Democratic Party insiders and operatives concerned that the Biden nomination would swing back and around to bite them on the proverbial backside. And now we're seeing it. Where they were saying it's not the same Biden. There's newer, shinier candidates. But when Biden got the nomination, everyone had to shut up back in 2018, 19 and toe the line. You don't support Biden? You MAGA? You hate women's rights? So even then, you might not like the president, but think about the Supreme Court, now that they're saying like, Biden's not the best candidate, but what would happen if another Trump justice got on the Supreme Court? So if they can't threaten you with Trump, they'll threaten you with the Supreme Court. So anyways, to think that any of these legacy media veterans were shocked by Biden's performance is just insulting. They got caught hiding it. During the debate, they were talking to DNC operatives about what's being said behind closed doors. So to explain it, like a lot of these pundits you see on CNN have contacts in the back rooms, people affiliated with like Democratic political operatives, members of the DNC, and they heard what was being said behind closed doors, confusion, donor panic. They were saying things like, we're in panic mode right now. And that is what these reporters reported right after the debate on Thursday. They were rattled and also wanted to maintain credibility, but they're also all complicit in the lie. The White House, Biden's aides, the DNC, and of course, the corporate media. Now, a couple of days have passed since the debate. 3 days. Yeah, that's not a couple, it's a few. Since the media apparatus is doing damage control now. The magnetic poles are kind of like realigned, and they're going to prop up Biden because the president isn't going to step down. So we saw their honest reaction Thursday night because, again, that's what they were being told by their sources. And now the apparatus has swung back, the pendulum has swung back, and it's business as usual. He's not going to step down, so they're going to have to prop him up. He's only ever been a politician. This is what he's wanted his entire life. You think he cares about America or the Democratic Party? He cares as much as Trump does. They both lied a lot. I mean, Trump lied more than Biden, but Biden still lied. Or if he didn't lie, he shouldn't be. He doesn't have the mental capacity to be president because Biden, for example, said no U.S. troops had died under his watch. Well, there are a few Marine families from the botched Afghan withdrawal who would disagree with him, as well as families of the soldiers in Jordan who died recently as a result from his Israel-Iran foreign policy. Dude literally went to these guys' military funerals, but okay, sure. So the fact that people pin their hopes on, celebrate any politician is gross. And again, I can say that, editorial license. So that's kind of what we're seeing right now. Looks like Biden's going to be the candidate. He flew up talked to his family. He has his family's support, good old fashioned American values. So it makes him look more approachable, like a family man. They're supporting him. So you should too. I think that's kind of one of the techniques that they're using. And yeah, they're going to run with it. So I don't know. I think everybody should have watched the debate just to get used to hearing Donald Trump's voice again. So I was talking to like one of my friends during the debate. I was like, hey, that scene in The Princess Bride where, the protagonist takes like what's called like iocane powder, just little doses every day. So that like when he gets the real thing, the real poison, you don't die. So just think about that. Think about watching the debate just to build up your tolerance because it's not looking good, especially in swing states like Michigan. So they're doubling down. They're not going to change. And there's I might do a whole episode on this about how like it would actually in some ways be helpful for the Democratic Party, the DNC, to have Trump, because then they could simplify the narrative to just be like about Trump. Remember during his presidency, everything was like, look at what Trump did. And it was a lot simpler to control your attention on that. This one's been messy. We've got like people starting to question like what's up with the war in Ukraine. Wait, what's going on with Taiwan? Is this Biden's policy? Is this like a Democratic liberal policy? Oh wait, there's National Guard in the New York subway stations. That seems like a thing Republicans can do, but the governor is not Republican. He's a Democrat. Oh wait, Roe v. Wade continues to get repealed at the state level. Okay, we need someone to blame. Can't blame Trump. This whole Israel thing is really awkward. People are saying words like genocide. It'd be a lot easier if Trump was doing it. So in some ways, I don't think they're too concerned. Then again, some donors are completely still concerned too. So we're gonna have to watch this play out. I mean, I'm shocked that I shouldn't be shocked. I should be more cynical now. They're going to double down because either way, the corporate interests win, right? So moving on, if you don't follow French politics, this is another election news story. If you don't follow French politics, you should to some extent, as well as German and British, if you want to get a sense of what is going on with Europe, because the U.S. doesn't just dominate Europe. What happens over there feeds back on the U.S. and U.S. foreign policy. So what just happened? Check it out.
Well-secured Elysee Palace the day after. Government representatives on their way to the presidential palace, where today's task is to analyze the historic election results. On the other hand, she is the radiant winner of the evening. In the French parliamentary elections, Le Pen's party, Rassemblement National, emerged victorious. Although neither Le Pen nor Macron were on the ballot, she framed the election as a vote against the incumbent president.
The French have shown with their clear vote that they want to turn the page after many years of destructive, dehumanizing government. This result is the first step towards a new government.
For France's President Macron, however, the result marks a new political low. After losing the European elections, Macron called for new elections. This move might have backfired, as his party ended up in a distant third place. Macron accuses Le Pen of running an extremist campaign.
The content of the last few days, the racism, the unchecked anti-Semitism, is a betrayal of France, our republic, and its values.
Voter turnout has significantly increased, likely because the campaign was so polarizing. In the streets of Paris, there were riots in leftist circles during the night. However, the parliamentary election is not yet definitively decided. The Rassemblement National has also failed to achieve an absolute majority. The decisive second round will therefore take place next Sunday. Rumor has it that Macron's party Renaissance could join forces with the Left Alliance to prevent Le Pen's supporters from sweeping the board.
Yeah, so Emmanuel Macron's centrist coalition just got smacked around by Le Pen's National Right-Wing Party, which is on the verge of victory for the first time in decades. This is important because it demonstrates that the political center in France has been crushed and is no longer attractive to the average voter in France. So Macron's coalition was made up of elements from the right and the left and was built on a sense of compromise for the greater good, status quo, but compromise voting or compromise politics is no longer seems to hold as much sway. We're either hitting left or plunging right. No middle ground. Now, French election politics is a bit complicated to the outsider. There are multiple rounds of voting, and now there's a runoff with up to 3 parties, a right, left, and center party with the right wing finishing first, as what just happened. So the election isn't decided yet, but it shows that people are done with compromise politics, and things are generally shifting right. So you have the AfD now surging in Germany. Meloni was just victorious in Italy. And now, Nigel Farage is back in the UK and mounting a candidacy. And guess what? He's kind of popular. So what we're witnessing is the increasing unpopularity of the neoliberal elite physically manifested in the walking skin suit of Joe Biden with this kind of empty, hollow, dead-eyed elite of Obama and the Clintons in the background. But there's Trump. And, that's the lesser of two evils. So you got to choose. That's democracy. Anyways, the common theme now from Europe to America is kind of the destruction of the center. What does it mean for France if Macron loses? He's Mr. EU. He wants an EU army, EU foreign policy. He's anti-Russia. If Le Pen wins, Marine Le Pen wins in France, she'll be softer on Russia based on the historical precedent of her party, but more pro-Israel and hawkish in the Middle East. So that would definitely affect EU policy, which would redound on US policy. And isn't the world exhausting? So that was a tiny primer, a kind of in the most wide macro brushstrokes of the Le Pen Macron ongoing drama within the French presidential election. So, more on France next week. So we'll see how that election pans out, and then we'll make predictions on how that will affect EU foreign policy going forward with regards to the war in Ukraine and the genocide happening in Gaza. So coming back to America, the U.S. House of Representatives passes a ban on death toll in Gaza. So in case you missed it, the House of Representatives voted Thursday to bar the State Department from using funds from the international affairs budget to cite any number of Palestinians killed by Israel in Gaza. So sorry, guys, I pulled some reporting from Fox News Live from earlier today. I think this is it right here. Wait, no. Oh, crap. Sorry, again, I asked what could possibly go wrong. Well, I think you're seeing it now. So fighting France story, old news. Casualty story. Here we go. Check it out. Fox News. I don't expect you to thank me, but you're going to listen. Cheers.
Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox, and you are taking a live look over the Israel-Gaza border, and a hot topic at last night's debate, no question, the Israel-Hamas war. As you saw before the break, Gaza war protesters did show up across Atlanta as Trump and Biden went head-to-head. So on that note, the U.S. House passed an amendment that would prevent the State Department from citing the civilian casualty figures that are provided by the Gaza Health Ministry, which is run by the Hamas terror organization. The amendment was...
I like how they always have to give that addendum, Hamas-run terrorist organization. Yeah, okay, fine, but you are blatantly disregarding the fact that the Biden administration in the White House and 10 Downing Street both use, cite, and somewhat trust the numbers coming out of the Gaza Health Ministry. So always love how the legacy media forgets to report that one basic fact that we established in November.
was part of the annual State Department appropriations bill and was spearheaded by Democrat Jared Moskowitz and co-sponsored by several Democrats and Republicans. The measure passed by an overwhelming majority of 269 to 144, with 62 Democrats and 207 Republicans voting in favor of it. The vote as the current war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza closes in on that 9-month mark. I do want to talk more about the latest developments there in the Middle East, so let's bring in a friend of the show now, Alex Trayman, the CEO and Jerusalem bureau chief over at the Jewish News Syndicate.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure this guy's going to be super objective about like what he says. He just heard his credentials, so based out of Jerusalem. That's not damning in and of itself, but he is on Fox too, so that's kind of like a double whammy.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Josh, thanks for having me.
Of course. So first question here, I want to talk about that amendment that was passed by the U.S. House, all related to those Gaza casualty figures. What is the significance of a bipartisan effort there to pass that amendment?
Well, I think it demonstrates that the Congress, both houses, had enough intelligence to understand that the figures coming out of the Gaza Strip were not reliable.
Yeah, first of all, this guy literally sounds like AI. I think his programming needs to blink more. That would make him seem like less of a part of the uncanny valley and less like a cyborg. Again, I've said that, they don't have the intelligence to, support not trusting the Gaza Health Ministry. In fact, insiders within the White House have already leaked that they do. So unless what he means by intelligence is foreign lobbying from organizations like AIPAC. Yeah.
Hamas's strategy has been to have Israel kill as many civilians as possible and to inflate the numbers of civilians killed in order to put diplomatic pressure on Israel to stop its campaign.
Okay, so again, just typical Darvo stuff. They made me kill all these civilians in like untargeted or shoddily targeted bombing campaigns. They've intentionally destroyed all civilian infrastructure. This is an exhausting argument, but it just goes to show how long this is going to take. In terms of like activism and education and educating your fellow human beings about this, because we're 9 months in and this argument still works. And in some ways, yes, Gaza was a trap because Hamas and other resistance forces or, terrorist organizations, however you want to frame it, knew exactly how Israel would respond by, doing a genocide, but nobody made them do this. This entire argument discounts the fact that senior Israeli officials have said, hey, we're going to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And so when you take the statements of the leadership in conjunction with the military tactics employed, common sense prevails. Yeah. So anyways, this is not the most convincing robot I've seen recently.
Here, the Congress is saying that those numbers can't be counted on and that Israel has not killed as many people as the Gazan Health Ministry, which is run by Hamas, says they did.
And sticking with the U.S. here,
Okay. Yeah. So, of course, that argument still persists. I just wanted to say that, the appropriation bill still needs to pass the Senate, and it's unclear how it will fail in the second chamber. But if it passes, then this Orwellian move where you can't say Palestinian deaths will effectively make the denial of Palestinian deaths U.S. policy. So it still has to pass the Senate. So Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib said, quote, "There is so much anti-Palestinian racism in this chamber that my colleagues don't even want to acknowledge that Palestinians exist at all. Not when they're alive, and now not even when they're dead. It's absolutely disgusting. This is genocide denial," unquote. Well, yeah, it's a very clear attempt to erase Palestinians in their entirety. Now, I do want to show you something. It's it says those numbers can't be trusted. So because they can't be trusted, we should essentially, the reasoning there is because the Gaza Health Ministry numbers can't be trusted. We have to therefore discount all Palestinian deaths because we don't have reliable numbers. Okay, so I just wanted to share one thing now that I'm thinking about it with y'all. We're going to share a news article that everybody wanted to talk about. Okay, so if we go to the UN war, this just came out 26th of April. Ukraine war. UNICEF highlights 40% rise in children killed this year. This is from the Ukrainian front. So attacks that occurred between January and March 25th. January and March left 25 children dead, including a 2-month-old, said the agency. Well, regardless of the numbers of the Gaza Health Ministry, you could just like look on Instagram and there's been more than 25 children in Palestine killed. So, the official UN data reveals that about 600 children have lost their lives and more than 1,300 have been injured in attacks since the war in Ukraine escalated in 2022. So 600 since 2022. The true number of children's lives lost is likely to be considerably higher, again, because that's the only number that's the only identification that local health authorities could determine in terms of loss of life of children. So the attacks have also destroyed infrastructure children in Ukraine rely on. So, like hospitals and water and stuff like that. So, I mean, I would say that, there's this obvious massive double standard that we're all keyed in on, but it's just kind of mind blowing that the government is still do it. I shouldn't be surprised at all, because we keep thinking that like this kind of like colonial genocidal stuff, happened in history books and didn't really happen now. At least I did when I was growing up. It's kind of shocking to see how brazen it is now, because it was like war crimes were brazen in like Iraq and what was happening during the Syrian civil war. But now that it's on social media and what they try to do is like ban it from TikTok, like ban TikTok. It's just kind of crazy, the absolute brazenness and the gaslighting going on. So because they say the numbers can't be trusted coming out of the Gaza Health Ministry, then no numbers can be trusted, which means what are the deaths really? That allows us to say it's just all Hamas. And, that still, we have to remind ourselves that does still fly for a lot of people, because it's not about trying to deny the Palestinians are dying. It's more about just erasing them as a statistic, which means erasing them as a person. And so other news there, as you know, the Supreme Court passed a resolution in Israel, the Israeli Supreme Court, drafting ultra Orthodox Haredis to address their mounting manpower shortage. So people are like, oh, this is really indicative that the front with Hezbollah is going to open up because they need more men. Well, what the front with Hezbollah is going to open up probably sooner rather than later if it happens. Otherwise, it's going to fizzle out. And if these guys are just getting conscripted into military service, that takes a long time to make them operational. They have to be in process. They have to be trained, which takes months and months. And then they have to be reassigned and deployed. Like this is like a year-long thing, I'm thinking. So it's not necessarily indicative that the front's going to really open up, at least not because they're trying to draft ultra-Orthodox guys. That this has been happening for a long time before this. It's just passing now because resentment and socio-cultural tensions are mounting inside Israel. And there's a lot of protests in response to this. So now, moving on to what's the fighting actually going on in Gaza. So earlier this morning, PIG, which is Palestinian Islamic Jihad, launched rockets from the previously secured city of Khan Yunis in a system of communication. So one of the things, and I've talked about this before, I'm not sure I've talked about this on State of Play, but I've done it on social media, is like when the rockets launch, these cheap like $1,000 Qassam rockets that you can make in a basement launch into Israel. They know every launch, unless there's enough to flood the airspace, but they never launch enough to flood the airspace. They know what will get intercepted by the Iron Dome. There's a couple benefits to shooting rockets because they know they're going to get intercepted. And if they don't get intercepted, it's because the AI control system in the Iron Dome or attached to the Iron Dome knows that wherever these unguided rockets are flying, they're going to impact in a deserted area. So either they're going to get let through the control system because they're not going anywhere vital, or they get intercepted, in which case $1,000 rocket eats up $150,000 Iron Dome interceptor missile. So, I mean, it is kind of a method of economic warfare, but that's kind of just like a drop in the bucket for the United States tax base. One of the main reasons they shoot rockets out of Gaza is a system of communication. So, if you remember when they invaded Rafah, resistance forces shot a whole salvo of rockets out of northern Gaza, because the whole pretext for invading Rafah was because that's the last place Hamas was. They've been dismantled. They're no longer operational in the north. So when the Rafah invasion started, they shot rockets out of the north to prove to everybody that they were still there and that there were certain lies being told on the international stage. So rockets are a system of communication, mostly. It's very unlikely that any damage would ever be done. It just eats up money, and it's meant to dispel certain propaganda. So early this morning, some rockets were launched. Again, they were supposed to be defeated in the north, and that didn't work out really well. So it's not just me saying this. I've cited someone, Joost Hilterman, Joost, Joost Hilterman, the program director for the Middle East and North African International Crisis Group, was quoted as saying today that one sec, guys. He was quoted as saying today, it's a quagmire. It's going to be a low-intensity conflict for a long time. You can use military operations to push Hamas into various pockets of Gaza, but eventually they filter back through the tunnel system or over land. They're gaining new recruits every day, young people who have lost their families. They're going to sign up. And I do want to show you this. This is from the Wall Street Journal article from this morning. This is as of June 30th, the sources for the Institute for the Study of War and the America Enterprise Institute Critical Threats Project, which are both think tanks, put together this map. So I don't know if we can zoom in. Let me try to make it bigger. That doesn't really work. Okay. Wait, does that bigger? All right. Well, if you look at this cross section, you see all the red areas. According to open source intelligence, those are where the current combat operations are ongoing. If you look at the pink areas, that is the furthest extent of all Israeli ground operations, and all the white area is where no ground operations have taken place at all. So just basically by looking at that, they haven't cleared nearly all of Gaza. They're basically choking off Gaza by controlling the Rafah crossing. They're in the south, just a little bit north of the Wadi Gaza, which bisects Gaza into two, and they're going to do a main thrust to partition Gaza into three. And this is what we're going to be talking about for the main bulk of the episode that we're about to get into. So, it's not cleared how this would work. Nice. You can see my little mouse thing. Okay. Mouse icon. So what it would work and how, if you were actually going to do this in terms of urban warfare, you clear one neighborhood or one sector at a time. And you go online. So you make sure that you find all the tunnels, you find all the fighters, you keep pushing them south until they're stuck up against the Rafah crossing and they have to surrender or die fighting. But they're just clearing random stuff. There's not a lot of, it seems like it's almost not about actually clearing Gaza. It's more about hitting random targets, forcing people to move and become continually displaced. They've left Khan Yunis. It wasn't cleared, or it wasn't cleared in a way that would make it impossible for Palestinian or PIJ to get back in. And they shot rockets from Khan Yunis right there in a system of communication saying, hey, we're still here. We're not just in Rafah. We're just not in the north, where Sujaiya, sorry, Arabic's horrible. It's not existent. All I can say is like Ana Isme Greg, and like Anabad of Shwe Arabic, and that's it. So Sujia neighborhood in northern Gaza is where a lot of fighting's going on. So all of this Rafah stuff is all crap. And before we get into plans for post-war Gaza or day after plans, let's look at the Al Jazeera reporting that just came out today on the fighting that's happening in northern Gaza.
Smoke billowing above the homes of the Shujaiya neighborhood is a sign of the relentless...
Shujaiya, okay. All right, I'm not even going to try it, but that's how you pronounce it.
Battle between Israeli forces and Palestinian fighters below. But it's those not fighting who are caught in the crossfire.
As the Israeli tanks advanced, there was lots of shooting. I saw people running for their lives, so I ran home to take my family. But within minutes, the Israeli tanks surrounded the area. We couldn't leave, so we were trapped there for 3 days.
Without access to food or medical care, these civilians in northern Gaza were not only trapped in their homes, they were targeted too.
We assumed they would not fire on children. I removed the curtain, certain that they would not fire, because only women and children were in. But within seconds, I found myself buried under the debris. In a blink, I saw nothing. I heard my children's screams, buried under the rubble.
The Israeli soldiers stormed our home, threw gas bombs all over the ground floor and stun grenades. They smashed the door and opened fire on us. We kept screaming that we are all women and children. We raised white flags, but no response. The Israeli soldiers kept shooting and shouting at us non-stop.
Not safe in their homes, Palestinians have the choice of either staying and risk being killed, or try to flee with the possibility of the same outcome.
We jumped over the ruins of a destroyed home at the end of our alley towards Shaf Road. We saw dead bodies torn to pieces all over the road. We ran towards the main junction under a wave of tank shells and bullets.
It's not clear yet how many Palestinians have been killed in the past 4 days.
They have taken my wounded mother. She was taken on the Israeli tank. She's badly wounded. I don't know what has become of her or what happened to her.
The Israeli military says 2 of its soldiers were killed in fighting on Saturday. But it's their attacks that are devastating the most vulnerable in Gaza.
Northern Gaza was where Israel began its attacks back in October, and months ago the Israelis claimed they had taken control of the area, but the renewed bombardment and intense fighting show that in North Gaza, like elsewhere in the Strip, this war is far from over. Tariq Abazoum, Al Jazeera, Deir el-Balah.
Definitely do agree with that. If there was any sanity, a ceasefire would have happened before Ramadan, but we're not doing that, and we're not living that life apparently. So yeah, this is definitely going to keep going on for a long time. So after Rafah, the Israeli military is expected to shift to a new stage of lower intensity fighting, consisting of intelligence-based raids. I mean, which they are doing it. They have the fanciest spyware, and they are taking out Hamas leadership and fighters, which is to be expected during a decolonial movement. But it's not going to end anytime soon, because again, Hamas is just recruiting new people, and they can produce their own weapons. They just released a video today of them creating their own mortar shells, and because they will never. They don't exactly have open supply lines, but the IDF will never get all the tunnels, so they'll always be able to get more stuff. So. Again, they're also shifting tactics to lower intensity fighting, which I might get into in a bit. So the Israeli propaganda apparatus is basically priming the public to accept a declaration of victory over Hamas and assorted resistance groups in Rafah as the military begins to shift the bulk of its operational and combat capacity to the northern front against Hezbollah. However, withdrawing from Gaza entirely in light of the IDF's failure to achieve any of its mission objectives is not politically tenable for myriad reasons, foremost of which is that Hamas would still exist both as a military and political entity with a swelling level of popularity among Palestinians, according to a recent poll conducted by the Palestine Center for Policy and Survey Research. So how are Israeli and U.S. Department of State and their associated advisory think tanks proposing to solve this dilemma? How does one continue the fighting in Gaza indefinitely, work towards a viable ceasefire, and create the framework and conditions for a future Palestinian state when visible, high-profile Israeli ministers are calling not just for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, but also for the annexation and settlement of the West Bank? Yeah. How do you continue the fighting in Gaza work for a ceasefire, and solve this dilemma. So, tonight on State of Play, we wanted to examine a number of these plans, all hopelessly unworkable in varying degrees, from creating a humanitarian pockets within military cordons to bringing Gaza an Arab coalition from, as of yet, unspecified states for the purposes of security and governance, like giving governance and security over to an Arab coalition who are not Palestinian. So one of the most significant breaks in all of these proposals for a day after plan in Gaza is the inescapable fact that Hamas will still exist and armed resistance will not stop and will not accept a foreign administrator. So, far-right think tank, Misgav, I think it's called. I'll show you the article in case you guys want to check it out. Where is it? Yeah. So, the Misgav Institute for National Security and Zionist Strategy. They're basically advocating for a complete military occupation, written by this guy who looks reasonable, very reasonable looking individual. To end Hamas, the IDF must temporarily control Gaza. Anyways, this think tank is therefore calling for a long-term military occupation, at least until roughly 3/4 of Hamas and PIJ are destroyed. Only then, it argues, can a civil authority be put in place. So, however, even if they are degraded by 75%, resistance forces will simply transition to lower intensity operations involving traps, improvised explosive devices, which we're already seeing them use, and the potential targeted assassinations of whatever vague civil authorities and collaborators these proposals envision. So, you can read that if you want. It's not going to work. In a surprising and rare move or comment last week, Netanyahu did say that the government would soon begin a plan to create a civil administration in the north of Gaza, run by local Palestinians, preferably with security assistance from Arab states. Again, there are no details or verifiable structure to this plan, which is in keeping with the prime minister's talent for prevarication, and just straight up lying, deception. But officials close to the matter, according to the Wall Street Journal, say Netanyahu is likely referring to the Bubbles plan, according to this Wall Street Journal report. So the Israeli establishment does not like to vary its methods. Thus, the creation of isolated enclaves where registered Palestinians who have denounced Hamas is appealing. So, like in West Bank, freedom of movement in between these geographic islands, these humanitarian enclaves, would be difficult, if not impossible. So all the while, Israel will continue to be isolated in the global community by what will inevitably be roundly condemned as another escalation of apartheid practices. Now, to really get into this whole Bubbles plan and this Arab coalition thing, it's just completely vague. So basically, they create these little fenced-in communities like ghettos where Palestinian civilians in Gaza would be screened. They would denounce Hamas. They would be allowed to go in. And, once they're getting in there, they're never leaving. And so they'd have these isolations, these like little ghettos throughout the Gaza Strip where, the Palestinians inside would be able to like fend for themselves and create their own little administrative pockets and like civil servants. There's no mention of like what the medical situation would look like. Like if you're in a civilian like a pocket with like no medical facility and like someone needs to go to a doctor, like how do you get there? Do you have to wait for Israeli permission to go from one humanitarian enclave to the hospital that's only in like another humanitarian enclave down the road? It's a completely insane plan. It's just it would never be able to be implemented in any meaningful way. And the idea is that the IDF would just continue to fight outside of these little humanitarian pockets like Hamas. And again, it's not implementable. It will only isolate them further for like literally doing apartheid, like worse apartheid that's in the West Bank. So, they could try that if they want, they probably will, because I could go through all the different proposals and plans that the U.S. officials have put forward, that Israeli officials have put forward, that United States think tanks and Israeli think tanks have put forward for what the day after plan for Gaza looks like. But this is the only one that matters because this is not new. It's being reported by the Wall Street Journal like it's new, but it's not new. When we talk about the Arab coalition, when we talk about humanitarian safe zones, and Netanyahu saying, they'll do this eventually. Well, let's look at something from February. It sounds kind of familiar.
Prime Minister's day after plan would have the IDF given full military freedom of movement inside Gaza. Israel would control the borders, not just with Israel that it has at the moment, but it would control the border of Gaza with Egypt. That would be significantly new and different, and it would work on the ground inside Gaza with Palestinian officials. No real specificity around that. And Israel, in this Prime Minister's note, is saying that it would reject any unilateral recognition of an independent Palestinian state. And it also talks about having a security buffer inside of Gaza to protect Israel. Now, there are things in there that really undermine the idea of a two-state solution, of a path towards a Palestinian state, something that would bring in Arab partners that this plan talks about being required to help finance and help support this new day-after plan for Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the stupidest parts of this plan. It's like you want to bring in an Arab coalition while in the meantime saying that you will not recognize a Palestinian state, when most of the Arab leaders have explicitly said we're not going to normalize or do anything until there's a path towards a two-state solution. And Saudi Arabia will probably try and keep to that because they're scared of their own population, and they've said that without a path forward to the two-state solution, this normalization deal is dead. So there's so many conflicting unresolvable and intractable elements to this day after proposal that it's just completely irrelevant. And again, nothing has changed. This is from February.
And this is something that has really caught the intention and critical attention too of not only the United States, but the European Union.
There are certain basic principles that we set out many months ago.
Oh my God, this
guy. That we feel are very important when it comes to Gaza's future, including that it cannot be a platform.
Fast forward.
Make sure that any plan that emerges.
Fast forward.
20 meeting in Rio, everybody sitting around the table, everybody, US, UK, European Union member states, Arab world, African people, Latin American people, everybody was insisting on the only possible peaceful solution that could provide Israel to live in peace and security is the two-state solution. I didn't hear a single voice against it.
And no surprise too, the Palestinian Authority have also been critical of the Prime Minister's day after plan, calling it a reoccupation of Gaza, saying that it serves his interests to prolong the war.
Literally nothing's changed since February. So Fuloside says these bubbles were called new villages in the Malayan emergency and agrovilles. Yeah, agroville in French Indochina and were run like internment camps with barbed wire enclosures, body searches, etc. So it's almost like they're taking it out of the playbook. That's exactly what it's meant for. And it's meant to reoccupy Gaza. And these bubbles are meant as ghettos, just like the West Bank, but way worse because everything's destroyed in Gaza. So, just like little West Bank villages, but again, worse because again, everything's destroyed in Gaza. So these day after plans are, it's all smoke and mirrors. It's just once you internalize the objective of this current regime in Israel and a lot of the people, a significant amount of the population that supports it, you know what they're really trying to do? We just had last week Smotrich, the Minister of Finance, say to a bunch of his Likud party insiders that they're going to annex West Bank, but they can't really call it annexing because that makes the international community nervous. So they're just going to do something else, and they have the quote backing of the prime minister, which is Netanyahu. So yeah, they can't call it what they're actually really doing because it's all this game of brinksmanship. What can they get away with, and how can they gaslight people into thinking they're not doing what they're really doing? And so these are in their post-war plan, as it's being stated, and as they refuse to define it, it looks like they're building post-war internment camps for the entire population of Gaza. So, yep, that's where we are. That is the ghettoization of Gaza. I didn't want to get too much into the Arab coalition because I don't think it would happen, but we might update this story as it progresses later on. So, cool. I think we're going to go to the Q&A section with our last 10 minutes. We've talked about Biden doubling down. We've talked about the rise of far-right fascist parties in Europe. Now we've got some Orwellian stuff happening in Congress where you can't say words or talk about numbers or statistics. So yeah, great time to be alive. Isn't it awesome to be like millennial or Gen Z, or even if you're really lucky, you have a lot more to look forward to if you're Gen A. It's only going to get worse. And we can laugh as Rome burns. All right, Q&A. I have not read The Management of Savagery by Max Blumenthal, so I'll check it out because I do like a lot of his reporting. Do you think getting kicked out of Africa is playing any role, or is it the support of Israel? I don't know the first part of that question, but I don't think getting kicked out of Africa is going to shift any foreign policy in any substantial way. I know they're having to shut down Agadez Air Force Base in Niger because I think they have to be out by September, but we're still going to keep running drone flights out of Niger. And then we're just going to shift to somewhere else. We have bases all over the Middle East and Africa that they can just shift assets. So it's not until there's like a massive uprising throughout Africa, which won't happen anytime soon, to get rid of U.S. presence. It's just it's going to be status quo. I don't think it's going to move the needle at all, just because Niger didn't re-up their base contract with the U.S. government. That's fairly routine. It happens sometimes, and then like reevaluate 2 years later, the base could get reopened. So unless there's a mass exodus of like bases from Africa, it's not a thing. It's pretty much business as usual. What's going on with Turkey and Syria? Okay, so you guys may have seen that. I think I might have a video here. Nope. A flight landed in Turkey, and the Turkish government, an Israeli flight coming from Poland, I think, landed in Turkey. Emergency landed because of like a medical emergency with one of the patients, or one of the passengers, excuse me. And there was this whole drama about not being able to refuel. So they had to fly to Rhodes, the nearby island of Rhodes, to refuel because they couldn't refuel in Turkey. There's supposed to be a trade ban from the Turkish government on Israel. However, they still are sending oil from Azerbaijan to Israel. So it's not kind of like this whole all-encompassing thing. But according to IntelliNews, that it's kind of misleading to say that Turkey is sending oil to Israel because they're contractually obligated to do so for a while. It has something to do with the Azerbaijani government being the one that's actually sending it to Israel, and it's just going through Turkish pipes, essentially. So I'll have to look more into that, but it's not just as simple as Turkey still continuing to send oil to Israel. So, yeah. Smotrach's plan for the West Bank is basically to annex it. I think I have an article that I can post to the chat right now. Where is it? Middle East Eye. Just Google Smotrich says we will annex West Bank and Netanyahu has our back. It was a leaked audio recording of him saying it explicitly. So Green weapons in that video today. Is that real and current? Why are they painting them green? The last video I played was from February, if that's what you're returning to. How many people, Greg, how many people will get involved if Israel attacks Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, others, maybe civilians? I mean, I'm not sure how many fighters will show up. I mean, they're saying 100,000 fighters will join. I don't know. I would say like 5 or 10% of that might show up, but because like people always talk a big game, and then Iran will have a say about like how many people get involved as well. So it's hard to predict, but they'll definitely shoot all these militia groups in the Levant and the Houthis in Yemen, and probably not Iran, because Iran doesn't want to escalate. They'd rather keep this a proxy war, and Hezbollah will open up and overwhelm the Iron Defense grid, their air defense artillery grid, and Israel will be hit incredibly hard in a way that's not sustainable. All infrastructure sites will go. So like, it's not even necessary that fighters join, because the amount of ordnance that could be put on target in Israel after overwhelming the air defense artillery systems in Israel would make them unable to fight a war. So fighters don't even need to get involved. So I imagine they won't get involved, because like people really don't want to die violently if they don't have to. So I imagine a lot of militias in the Levant and Lebanon, or not Lebanon, in the Levant would just shoot like a bunch of drones and rockets. That's it. Can I interview Yanis Varoufakis to give his take on why fascism is rising across the globe? I mean, I can reach out to see if he'll come on. This is a new show, so we'll see if I have that kind of pull. Okay, next question. He's the ex-Greek finance minister. He writes a lot of stuff. Why does the U.S. Air Force need to land in Ireland when they have bases in England? Well, it depends on how much hangar space and how much cargo space they have to store at the bases in Northern Ireland. It may be a lot. I'm not a member of the U.S. Air Force, but I know that there's a limited number of planes that can land an airfield or an airport at any given time. So it probably has to do with crowding and logistical supply chains as well. So I'm not completely sure about that, but okay. How long until non-confidence in the government and the U.S. dollar results in collapse, in your opinion? Okay, so just because BRICS is on the rise and moving towards a multipolar world order is the thing, like, doesn't mean it's going to happen anytime soon. The de-dollarization of Earth is not something that's going to happen overnight. I mean, it'll happen eventually, but it's still really inconvenient to do that, because that's the world's reserve currency. So yeah, Saudi Arabia is like trading the petrodollar. Didn't renew its contract for the petrodollar, but that doesn't mean that just because it's trading oil in the yuan and stuff, it's going to mean that we can de-dollarize anytime soon. So there's a couple good books on BRICS that kind of talk more about this. I'm not a big finance guy, but one of the main reasons to not get off the dollar is because it's super inconvenient. But watching the sanctions happen on Russia and China and Iran, people are like, you know what, maybe it's worth the inconvenience, because the United States, if we do something that they don't like, they could try to choke out our economy. So it's going to happen eventually, but every finance expert I've talked to is like decades to really truly come up with alternative currencies, because the fist of the U.S. empire is around everybody's throat still. Did I hear about the recent fightings between Turkey and the Syrian rebels? No, I'm actually not tracking that. That's been going on for a long time, and I'm not really. I don't have the bandwidth for that conflict as well, but that's nothing new. I'll look into it though. Okay, so last question. In the late 70s, the U.S. Army, we were indoctrinated into the rule of law and the treatment of civilians and POWs. Is that gone now? No, I still learned about handling prisoners of war and detainees when I went through Army basic infantry training at Fort Benning in like 2009. And they still teach the law of land warfare. I don't think Israel does, but I know we do. And we actually do send our guys to Fort Leavenworth prison when they break the law of land warfare egregiously. So yes, but Israel doesn't punish their people internally, and it doesn't seem like they teach them the law of land warfare. So yes, it's not gone now. The same rules of war, which get broken, were taught in the 70s, and they're still taught now. But then again, there's the massive double standard for Israel. All right, y'all. So we are at the end of our time. This was your weekly news roll-up from the weekend. We've got the legacy. Just to recap, we talked about the legacy media. At first rattled and shocked by Biden's performance, but now they've corrected themselves and they're trying to refix the narrative, and they're backing him again, saying like he's a good candidate. He's old, but like he's a seasoned captain. He's going to be sturdy at the helm. Then we talked about the rise of far-right movements in government. And then we talked about all the crap still going on in Gaza, fighting in the north when Hamas and the PIJ are not supposed to be in the north anymore, and this horrible plan for internment camps, humanitarian internment camps in Gaza. So that's where the current situation stands right now. Wouldn't expect a ceasefire anytime soon. Water cooler talk in southern Lebanon is that an invasion will potentially happen mid-July, so in a couple weeks if it does happen. So that's kind of like a good time window we're looking at. They had to recently remobilize 50,000 troops, and that takes time to redeploy them, retrain them, and send them to the front. So yeah, it still needs a couple like a week or two more of logistical planning before an invasion could start anyways. So we'll see if that happens. Again, they need to wind down Gaza first. Looks like they're priming the narrative for that, talking about planting stories in the Wall Street Journal and the Times of Israel that they're actually talking about a day after plan when there is no actual day after plan. So yeah, what can you say after 9 months of this stuff? Are you still surprised? So remember, if you want to support Mint Press with its endeavors to be watchdog independent journalism, check us out on Patreon. Thanks y'all so much for watching, and we'll be back with another episode of State of Play this week. So cheers y'all, have a good night and a good week.